Okay. We had, hi everybody, Ken Huff, Executive Director with SBCAN. And I had maybe 6 people write to me and say they really wanted to come to this and they're really interested in all the subject matter, and could they please get a video of it if we were going to record it. And we usually do record it, and we don't usually post it on the web or anything, but maybe sometimes we have. Mostly we have it, and if people are interested, then we send it to them. So thanks for the introduction, Dick. And so I'm going to introduce Mike Becker. He's the deputy, he's the planning director for the Santa Barbara Association of Governments. And Dick figures I must know him pretty well because I used to work there. But of course, when I worked there in 83 to 86, Mike wasn't there yet, but we've met a few times. And so as director of planning, Mike has overseen a major study of commuting here in Santa Barbara County and beyond. And so the agenda has him first, and then Linda Honickman's got a bunch of good information about her studies about housing in the county. And then I've got on the agenda the 4th thing, sort of open discussion, because these things are very related to one another. And so that'll be the chance for everybody to say what they think about those issues and how they interrelate. And I guess I'd just say also that this roundtable in the old days, like before about 8 years ago, we used to call it the Housing Open Space Transportation Committee, the HOT committee. And it's because of such a strong relationship between those topics. So we're sort of back to the HOT agenda with this meeting. And Mike, thanks for joining us. Looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Ken, and thank you, Dick. Again, I'm Mike Becker. I'm the Director of Planning at SBCAG, and I was asked to give this presentation, which we are calling it Regional Travel Trends. Sometimes it's Regional Travel Patterns, but ultimately it's a project where we're looking at how people move in Santa Barbara County, why they move, where they move. Move being mobility, not necessarily moving where they live. But I do have a PowerPoint, and I'll walk through that. I did try and focus this a bit on South County. You will see a little bit of North County stuff mixed in, but the intent today was to try and keep it focused on the South County. So let me share my PowerPoint if I can. Okay.
I think you can. There you go.
All right. So I guess the official title of our project is Understanding Regional Travel Patterns. So here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about why we're doing it, how we're doing it with the replica platform. I'll walk you through a series of analyses that we've completed. It's by no means everything that we've done, but a kind of a snapshot of some of the more interesting things that we've done. Talk about where we're going with the project, and then give you time for questions and answers, and I'll do the best that I can to satisfy those. So first off, why we're doing it. This project is not meant to solve any problems, or it's to satisfy any like planning requirements or anything on its own. It's purely gathering and assembling a whole bunch of good information that can inform how we plan in the future. So it's again, it's looking at building a catalog of data that we can refer to in the future, and not necessarily trying to solve anything right now. And through this, the whole idea behind it was to get a subscription to a big data platform and to use that to answer a lot of questions that are hard to answer otherwise. Not everything that I'll share today, and not everything that's going to be in the future report, comes from this platform replica. There's also, you'll see a couple other things sprinkled in, just plain old US Census or California Department of Finance or a couple others, but most of it, the vast majority of it does come out of the replica platform. So I think it's worth explaining what Replica is. So Replica is a company that provides this mobility data, and how they do it is they use an activity-based model. And so if transportation agencies typically have some type of travel demand model that they use to forecast into the future. So we have, you know what your population is, you know where how the built environment looks, and then you calibrate the model to try and mimic existing condition, and then you use it to forecast out into the future. With Replica, they don't care about the future. They only care about trying to replicate the existing condition. So what they do is they develop a model with the existing transportation network, including bike paths, bus routes, roads, and they lay over top of that the demographic data, so the existing population. And then they start calibrating their model. And typically, I'd say models are a good representation of reality, but they're not great. With Replica, I think you can go to that next level and say, yes, it is great. And the one thing that makes it more accurate is as they calibrate it to replicate existing condition, they use mobile location data, which is they purchase anonymized cell phone data that shows how people move, and they can use that data to calibrate their model. So with the mobile location data, it's not 100% sampled. So some of it is modeled, but this is about as good as you can get in terms of respecting people's privacy and creating a representation of reality. And you can almost say that the margin of error that's built into Replica is inversely correlated to the level of privacy that's provided.
Excuse me, Mike, somebody's eating potato chips or something, so please mute yourself. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then say also, as they calibrate the model, there's also, say, Caltrans or other agencies do traffic counts. So they lay tubes on the road or have automated counters built in. The transit companies have ridership data. All this stuff is also used to calibrate the model. So the end result is a pretty good or really good representation of reality. Much better than you can find elsewhere. So this list is not complete. It's just a snapshot of kind of the things that we're looking at, a lot of journey to work stuff, some statistics on our highways. And if by the end of the year, we'll release the report and you'll see that it's quite extensive, what we've done. But basically, I've called this a mining exercise. We get a subscription to the platform and we mine it for all it's worth, pull out every good nugget of information that we can. So now I'll roll into some of the work we've done. So as I mentioned, not everything comes from Replica, and we're starting off outside of Replica, but looking at the change in employment throughout the county, and you can see the years going into the recession. Yeah, pretty good job losses in South County. Coming out of the recession, you could see where the job growth was, and I find it interesting here, like you see Goleta lost 1,000 jobs leading into the recession, and then added about 5,300 coming out of the recession. And then housing production. If you consider the last slide, it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison because the years don't perfectly line up, but you can kind of see how the jobs housing balance is improving or not improving. So you could see, just using Goleta for example, because we talked about it on the last slide, we say about 4,500, 4,300 jobs created over a 15-year period. Well, here over a 23-year period, they added about 1,700 housing units. So that would mean you're adding about 2.5 jobs for every housing unit. Again, not a perfect comparison, but just something to highlight, kind of what we're looking at here. This, I just pulled this out the other day, but this came from Redfin, which if you haven't been to Redfin's data center, provides a wealth of information, and this is the median sale price of housing units for every July, going back 2012 to 2023. And you can see here in the lower left some of the changes over a 10-year period. Like, for instance, the median sale price of a housing unit in the city of Carpinteria increased by 148% over 10 years. Goleta wasn't quite as high as 31%. City of Santa Barbara, 126%. And the county overall, which includes the North County, prices essentially doubled over a 10-year period. So again, if you look at all three of these, the last things, with job growth, and then housing growth and housing costs, again, these three things all speak to each other related to the jobs housing imbalance. So we also looked at work from home. This was particularly of interest to us, as we're responsible, part of our responsibility is demonstrating how the region can reduce greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles. So one of the strategies, or one of the ways that we hope to do that, is by encouraging remote work. So here you could see 2019 is pre-pandemic. We had about 6% of our workforce working from home. 2021, which was during the pandemic, it shot up to almost 16%. And then, well, you could say post-pandemic or coming out of the pandemic, it did stay higher. And in the future, we hope that this stays high. This is a huge benefit on the transportation network and a huge benefit for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So yeah, ideally, we'd like to see this high. We looked at who are the people who are working from home. The age doesn't tell a particularly useful story. It seems to be fairly spread out amongst the age cohorts. But this, by household income, this one is much more interesting, and it just shows basically, as you make more money, you're more likely to work from home. The highest percentage of people that work from home are people in households that make more than $200,000 a year. Okay, now we're getting definitely into the replica stuff. So for each of these, I'm going to highlight one or two things that are of particular interest. So what you're looking at here is the work trips originating in the host jurisdiction. So for instance, Buellton's the top line. So of the people who wake up in the morning in the city of Buellton and are going to go to work, 19.6% of that population stays in Buellton to work. City of Santa Barbara, 66% of the city's workforce, or 66% of the people who are workers in the city of Santa Barbara stay in the city of Santa Barbara for work. Goleta is a bit less, but I think through this we also found that Goleta has a huge tie with UCSB, which is not in the city. So it's, despite it being pretty low, it's not quite as bad. And then on the other side, this one is also related to kind of the work trips coming in. So people can wake up anywhere and go to work, but this is where they're working. So working in the city of Buellton, 73% come from outside the city of Buellton to work. City of Santa Barbara, 43.7% of the jobs are filled by people who do not live in the city of Santa Barbara. But I think for this, it's also interesting to look for the South County, which is the 3 cities plus all the incorporated areas in southern Santa Barbara County. 13.5% originate of the work trips that end in southern Santa Barbara County started outside of southern Santa Barbara County. And I have other slides that show where they're coming from. And then 9.5% of the people, or of the jobs in Santa Barbara County, are filled by people who started their trip outside of Santa Barbara County. So that could be Ventura County, Los Angeles County. And in the north, there's a huge tie to San Luis Obispo County. Oops. Okay, so now we're looking at long distance commuting, and this is defined for our purposes as trips longer than 16 miles to go to work or longer than 32 miles to go to work. So similar to the last table, this first looks at origins. So trips that originate in these jurisdictions. So just picking on Buellton as they're on top. Of the trips that start in Buellton, they could also end in Buellton, but they can end anywhere else. 45% are longer than 16 miles, and 35% are longer than 32 miles. Say city of Santa Barbara, we saw on a prior slide that a huge part of the Santa Barbara workforce lives in Santa Barbara. So you can see that the percentage of trips originating in Santa Barbara are a lot lower, 7.8% longer than 16 or 6.5% longer than 32. You can see the South County numbers here. And you can see that the North County numbers are a bit higher, but you have the North County, everything's further spread apart, as well as some of the workforce is coming down south or going into SLO County. So that's why those numbers are higher. Probably of more interest is the destination. So this is trips can start anywhere, but this column is where they end. And it's all, again, for the purpose of going to work. So let's look, Southern Santa Barbara County, the city of Santa Barbara, 16 or 17% of the trips that end in the city of Santa Barbara for people going to work are longer than 16 miles, 15% are longer than 32 miles. And while you look at something like, say, Buellton has a higher percentage, the end value is much, much lower. So the 14% from Santa Barbara is a lot higher. And then, say, city of Goleta, they're attracting 23% of the jobs that they, or people commuting for jobs into the city, are longer than 16 miles. Almost 20% are longer than 32. Carpinteria, this one I thought was kind of interesting. 40% are longer than 16 miles, but only 10% are longer than 32 miles. And what's in the middle of the 16 and 32 miles from Carpinteria, that's Ventura. And then South County, where of the work trips coming to South County, 20% are longer than 16 miles, 15% are longer than 32 miles. So getting into, and I put but here, and you'll see why. This is the median average and median distance for work trips. Again, this is trips originating. So originates in, say, Buellton, and this side is trips destined for. So these are the trips that end up in Buellton. Looking south, I think I wanted to show Santa Barbara here. The difference between the average and the median, a median that low is phenomenal. To have a 3.8%, but the average is 13%. So what that means is there are a whole lot of very short trips coming to the city of Santa Barbara for work, which is probably largely the people who live and work in the city of Santa Barbara. Yet that median gets pushed up for the average based off of the number of long distance trips coming into the city. And then South County, you could see here similar, the median, so half above, half below, is only 3.9 miles, which is really good. But then the difference between the median and the average just kind of shows the polar ends of the workforce in terms of their commuting. Okay, so I have two slides for this. So this one is originating in, and then we're going to have the destined for. So this is work trips that originate in Southern Santa Barbara County, and that's 105,000 work trips start the day in Southern Santa Barbara County. So where do they go? Again, they could start anywhere in Southern Santa Barbara County. You could see that a lot of them end up in the city of Santa Barbara, Goleta, Isla Vista, UCSB, CARP. We do send people in Southern Santa Barbara County to Northern Santa Barbara County. 3.7% of our workforce travels to Northern Santa Barbara County. 2.6% goes to Ventura County. So there is it's an unbalanced flow, but there are people who start in southern Santa Barbara County and go to work in Ventura County. How they get there, this private auto, you can view that as single occupant. Auto passenger would be carpools, and then the walk, bike, or transit. And you can see it's pretty high on the alternative, 16.5% for the alternative transportation, but this is the trips that start in southern Santa Barbara County. And then you could see the percentage of the trips that are in the various distance categories. And this is trips that start in southern Santa Barbara County, so almost 3% of the people then drive or take transit 64 miles or more to work. And then, so this is just the opposite. This is the destined for. These trips can start absolutely anywhere, including in southern Santa Barbara County, but they end in southern Santa Barbara County. So you can see where they end, or where they started. Again, you see the city of Santa Barbara is the largest jurisdiction on the South County, so you have a lot of them start there. But I think this number here, the 82%, that's of interest. That is 82% of the jobs that are filled in southern Santa Barbara County. The workers started their trip to work in southern Santa Barbara County. 8.7% came from northern Santa Barbara County. 7.2% came from Ventura County. And you could just multiply the percentage times the end value to get the number of trips. Again, you could see how they move. These figures maybe dropped a hair from the prior one. And then you could see people who are coming to work in southern Santa Barbara County have about 15% here, or 32 miles or longer, with 4% of that. So 4% of 118,000 being 64 miles or more. Okay, not sure if this is super interesting to you, but I knew it was really interesting to me, and Replica provided us an opportunity to answer this question. And it's, say you're in Santa Maria and you're going to Santa Barbara, which way do you go? You're given a choice of the 154 or the 101, and also inversely. So if you're at point A, just up here north of Los Olivos on the 101 coming south, 48% of the vehicles coming down the 101 here are also will be on the 101 down here. And we find that 62% of those will choose the 154. The other direction, it's a much lower proportion that goes from B to A, just because there's a lot of local traffic on the 101 in South County. So it's only 14% connect B to A. Again, a majority, 54%, use the 154. So this shows for the 101, why either slower Ventura County residents are coming into Santa Barbara County on the 101. I think this group's probably more interested in the Ventura side. But this was of interest to me, the work. Work is the largest category of why people from Ventura County are coming to Santa Barbara County, at least during the week. But it is not by itself a majority of the trip purpose. It's about 40% of the people coming from Ventura County into Santa Barbara County up to 101 are going to work. So that means 60% are not. They're coming here for other reasons. Move on. This one's pretty interesting. So it's looking at this is South County only. So the mode share for alternative transportation being bike, walk, or ride a bus. The percent, and so you have different trip purposes here. All trip purposes, this is how they get around. Surprisingly, there's a lot of trips that people walk. So a lot of short trips are taken by people walking. And then when you start getting into the purposes for work, 4% ride a bike, 11% walk, 1.5% take transit. But what I found pretty interesting on these was once you start getting into breaking it down between the white or Hispanic populations or by income group. So you can see that the Hispanic population uses alternative transportation modes higher than the white population. And then this is work or school, the same too. And then these ones are pretty interesting. Any trip purpose by household income. And you can see as your income rises, you're less likely to use an alternative transportation mode. So the one here at the bottom is, this is if you're going to work or school in these 3 income groups. And again, the more money you make, the less likely you are to ride a bike, walk, or take transit. So this is vehicle miles traveled by jurisdiction. And this is just the total aggregate sum of every vehicle's traveling during a day. So you have the number of miles in each jurisdiction that are driven, and we divide that by the 2020 population. So we did it for 2019 and 2022. However, I do have to qualify that we balanced it against the 2020 population. So both of those numbers are compared against the 2020 population. So you have pre and post-pandemic conditions. And the one thing that was really good news to us is coming out of the pandemic, the total miles driven in a day in the county has decreased almost 9%. So that was good to see and good for our responsibilities related to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. This one's also interesting, kind of looking at how people move depending on how they live. So let's just look South County here. And this is any trip purpose. But the one thing, you're looking at the single family homes, or if they live in a multifamily development, some type of condos or apartments. And it is interesting to see that the more sustainable modes of travel are higher for the multifamily developments across basically all categories here. However, I think a question came up another time I presented this was why? And I think part of it is probably explained just by the location of the multifamily developments, that they are in more dense areas that are more conducive to walking, biking, or taking transit than the single family homes. And we did the same thing here for work or school. So I think related to the jobs housing imbalance, I know the number one question that's posed to SBCAG, we probably get every week or two an email from somebody asking how many people come from Ventura County for work. And so this is a little bit about why or who is coming into Santa Barbara County from Ventura County. And so here is the household income. So this is for work. So I tried to bold these just to make them stand out. But I think everybody knows this, but this just confirms it, that of the Ventura County population that works in these various household income groups, there's a higher percentage come to Santa Barbara County than anywhere else. So it beats the Ventura County average. So that's if the $50,000 to $150,000 household income group has a higher percentage coming to Santa Barbara County. So it's the missing middle or the middle income. You can see where they're coming from for any purpose or for work, and then where they're going to. And interesting, you do have a sizable population of people who start their work commute in the city of Ventura or in Ventura County that go to northern Santa Barbara County too. It's not just South Coast. Okay, so I've walked you through a handful of the analyses that we've performed. Just let you know where we're going with this. We continue to work on the project. Like just, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, I was doing the household median sale price. And in November and December, we plan to wrap this project up. It'll be in a report that will be PDF'd in on our website, but we're gonna take it through our advisory committees and our board before it ends up as a final version on our website. So you can expect that in November, December this year. We do have other priorities to move on to, so we do have to, it's got a project, like it has no limit. You can keep doing these forever, but we do have to draw the line somewhere. So yeah, expect a final report by the end of the year. And then after that, we'll refer to this, and hopefully you and others will refer to it as well as you do your work. And with that, that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm happy to take any questions you got.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. This is Dick Black speaking. One question I immediately have, there's been a certain number thrown around a lot for the number of years about how many people come to work in the city of Santa Barbara from outside the city. And it's in the neighborhood of 20 or 30,000 is the number I keep hearing. How does that relate to what you just presented?
Yeah, let me look at my one slide here real quick. So we have into the city of Santa Barbara. I'd actually have to go to my report to get the actual number for city of Santa Barbara. But you can ask another question while I try and dig this up real quick.
Well, one question several people would like copies of this. Is that going to be available now, or is it something to wait for?
I think ideally you'd wait until we complete it. So right now it's still a work in progress. You do have the recording from today, and I know Lauren, she may be able to say whether or not it's appropriate to share the PowerPoint.
People would like the PowerPoint if they can. Those are very interesting tables and not easy to just keep track.
Mike, if those tables are final for you, then I'm okay with you sharing
Okay.
that, as long as it's your final work.
Yeah, I'll send the PowerPoint to Ken following the meeting.
Great. Okay. So anyone who wants to see those tables in that form, Ken, can you handle the flood of requests that you'll be getting? Yeah, I assume you
Yes,
can. All right. Well, that's great.
I have a question.
Who's that? Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
I'm just to segue on this, since you're looking at that report, the same question. I have the same question Dick asked for Goleta.
Okay, yeah, and I could get that right now. So I got everything I need up. I'm currently bringing up a calculator so I could turn it into a percentage. So we have 43.7% of the jobs in the city of Santa Barbara, according to this, are filled by folks outside the city.
43% of what was the number, the population number, Mike?
43,
100,000.
yeah, for the city of Santa Barbara, it's 56,600. So it's 43% of 56,600.
Okay, so that's close to that 30,000 that people keep using.
Yeah, so it's about 25,000.
But a lot of them come from not far away. Is that what I was concluding from what you presented?
Yes, we had the median trip distance for people coming to the city of Santa Barbara to work was really short. What was it, 3.8 miles, I believe. So, but that also includes people who live in the city of Santa Barbara and work in the city of Santa Barbara.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that would be good to separate out as those who travel to their jobs but live within the city because they're housed here. Because a lot of this has to do with how much housing would we have to build? Isn't this one of the key questions? to actually get a better work housing balance. Isn't that really one of the fundamental things you're getting at? So do you have some kind of answer to that? I doubt that you do right away, but how?
I don't right away, but I think I believe that's what Linda's working on. I know I talked to Lisa Carlos and Diane Black, and they have a project going on specifically to try and answer that question.
So the thing
And
about,
also this, I just want to also caveat of remind folks of what Mike said before. The replica data that we're doing is current conditions. So you have to factor in future job growth or changes in industry and things like that. Those are all multi-layer faceted on that side of things.
well, let me make one final point, then I'll just turn it over to other people on this very matter. What I was hearing was that because a lot of the people who work in the city live nearby, that it isn't, we could separate that from the people who are making longer commute and say, what we need is better public transit as well as housing, so that people don't have to drive to their jobs in the city. Is that a reasonable point? And will your report help us quantify that statement?
Yeah, the report will certainly help quantify how many people are coming from the south or how many people are coming from the north. So yes, you could see what the value is. And I know that we also, something else that SBCAG is working on, I was asked for the number of people coming up from Ventura County for work as kind of what's the theoretical maximum for transit. Yeah, so, but real quick to answer the Goleta question, the same figure is about 13,600 are coming into Goleta for work.
But
And
they
the number for Santa Barbara, did you say 56,000 or?
25.
Now, 56,000 is the total job pool, and what did we say? 25,000 were coming from outside of the city of Santa Barbara.
Yeah, it's about 25,000, about approximately. And
See, that number alone, if you said, well,
Right,
that's the commuting in, and we want to greatly reduce that, but that's very daunting to think we're going to have that much housing in the cities. But once we break it down, as you are seeming able to do, to those who are living within transit distance of the city, then that's a different way of thinking about it. I think. Am I on the right track?
I think you are, and I think that relates to kind of SBCAG or the planning side of SBCAG's, if primary responsibility is updating and maintaining the regional transportation plan sustainable community strategy. And through that, kind of, if in a nutshell, what that tries to do is to turn 30, 40, 50 mile commutes into 5 mile commutes. So that would be kind of correcting the jobs housing imbalance. And then for those shorter commutes, to be able to provide multimodal options.
Right.
So that not everybody drives it.
Yes.
you mean the longer commutes too, also, Mike,
Yes.
is the multimodal because of the relationship that we have with regional, like interregional transit. So Ventura County Transportation Commission, your local taxpayer dollars are funding Coastal Express with the Ventura County Transportation Commission. And once the carpool lane is fully realized, we'll have the ability to have high transit options and carpool options and van pool options from the south.
All right. Well, this is very excellent. Maybe we need to let Linda give her presentation, then we can have a kind of open discussion. That's what the agenda said for both of you. So if you can stick around, Mike, that would be wonderful. And
Sure.
Linda, you want to hop in?
Hello. So let's see, let me introduce myself. I'm Linda Honigman, and today I'm not wearing my hat as a League of Women Voters Housing Committee member, but I am very active, and you are all welcome to come to our next meeting, which is October 20th, and that's noon on Zoom. The hat I am wearing today is as an affordable housing advocate. I co-founded a nonprofit, Future Housing Communities, in 2019, And that has the mission of supporting more housing security and sustainable supportive neighborhoods for the South County. And we're on hold at the moment because during COVID, all of our renter board members had to deal with their own housing issues. So hopefully that can be resuscitated at some point. My second hat, full disclosure, I am a resident of the unincorporated county and I live across the street from San Marcos growers. So that also adds to my interest. Let's see. So, whoops. This is where my notes say read the room. Well, it's, as you would expect at SBCAN meetings, it's a very knowledgeable group. So I think we're generally good about meanings of acronyms. And so if somebody has a question about anything that I'm saying, put it in the chat, and then maybe some of these other people can help answer if I'm not able to see the chat while I'm screen sharing. And as Dick said, it is better to just put whatever your questions are in the chat so that we can deal with them in good time. And let's see. So I wanted to just start before I show the slides with kind of an overview of where we are with the county housing element update. And I'll be referring to that as the HEU quite a lot. They just updated, they have version 3 as of last week on the website. And I've put the links for that in the chat. And there are a couple of changes, not a whole lot, but you can track the changes by looking at the underlined and the blue and the red comments. And the very latest tend to have yellow highlights. You can also see the latest public comments. And that includes, for example, a letter from Mike Chiacos about maybe having taller buildings and upzones than IV. And a letter from the city of Carpinteria saying that they're still concerned about their the parcels that were proposed to be upzoned in the adjoining county, but they have identified one parcel, Van Wingerden 2, I believe, that they don't mind as much. And then let's see, we want to, so I'm going to be showing the slides that review where we are. I focused mainly on Appendix D and any charts that will kind of give us an idea of what to expect in the upzoned areas. And I've combined the data in the HEU. It has pending projects and it has numbers from upzones, but it doesn't really add them together, which is very important in some of the areas like the one I'm going to focus on. We will also be looking at the effect of some of the state laws, SB 35 and the state density bonus, which really are making a big difference, making it very challenging, I think, for planning this year. And we will see how some of the assumptions are not very realistic, such as 50% of the units in the upzone locations will be for low-income residents. But we also have to acknowledge the planners kind of had to do that because that's what's required by the state in order to get the housing element approved and certified. And without that, we're going to continue to have these issues with the builder's remedy that will continue to not give us a lot of local control and actually could make our housing crisis worse. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let me make sure I'm in the right location too, because sometimes it cuts it off. Okay. And of course, that's at the end. I'm not even supposed to be showing those slides, so just give me a second to get back to the beginning. You'll see a little preview of lots of stuff here. It looks a little overwhelming, but don't worry. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on any one thing. Oops, that's even the end of part one. Okay. Almost there. Okay. So potential and strategies for affordable housing in South Santa Barbara County, using data from the September 14th housing element of the county. We're going to be looking at 5 different scenarios. So what you can see easily in the county element is just scenario 1, which is the capacity without upzones. And for what RENA wants, what the state mandates, is that the unincorporated part of South County needs to have about 4,100 units added in the 8 years, or at least it looks like a good chance of being added in the next 8 years. And they want you to add a 15% buffer, and that's about 4,500 something units total. So this is our housing capacity scenario 1. You can see that we only have, not surprisingly, we've only got 584 lower units that could come from, and these are pending projects mostly in the South Coast. Okay, and then scenario 2. This will take a while to look at. So first of all, the dark red are the potential upzone areas and the total number of units that are proposed at the moment. The blue are the pending projects, which are already in the pipeline. So as I said, in order to really look at the impact of all of this, it's important to add, say, the San Marcos growers upzone numbers with what's already planned for Tatum and MTD property. They're all right around that intersection of the 101 Turnpike down to Hollister. While I'm here too, there were 3 changes. Oh, and by the way, this does not include Carpinteria. So that's the other main upzoned area that we'll look at maybe in a future meeting. There were 3 areas that did have reductions from June to the September HEU. Glen Annie, I believe, if we looked at this map in June, it would have had 1,500 something total units. And they have proposed also a reduction, a little bit of density. The main difference in Glen Annie, and also this affected the Georgie site of the South Patterson block. The state did not want the county to assume they could build more than 300 low-income units on those larger parcels, which is being a little bit more realistic. So in the case of Glen Annie, instead of 757 low-income units they were originally proposing, now they're only 300. So you've got a 30% chance of low income if the current plans would be able to go through. The third difference between June and now is that, sadly, UCSB, they've got the same total number of units, but they moved quite a few of the moderate income level units into the above moderate column. Okay, scenario 3. So now we're inputting information from the owners. What's actually going to happen? What permits have been applied for and so on. So this shows that for a parcel like San Marcos Growers that's been sold or that got some kind of commitment, you're more likely to get 20% affordability. And that's in the lower income. And that allows you, for one thing, to have the so-called builder's remedy. So you can get everything expedited and jump over a lot of hurdles quickly. The really important part of this to look at is the very bottom where it says 18% lower income units, 1% moderate units, 81% above moderate. And then looking at it percentage wise, you can see what the RENA mandates would give you. And this is percentages, not actual number of units, which actually make it look worse. But this shows, this is what we're all hoping for. Well, this is what the county is hoping for in order to get the approval from the state. But the bottom example, and by the way, the top two are from the overall South Coast numbers. The bottom one is the example of the Turnpike 101 San Marcos Hollister example, which is a little more realistic. But even that is probably a low number. And we'll look at that now. So scenario 4. Projects can expand in part because of the state density bonus law. And you will see that referred to in the county element as SDBL. So that allows you all kinds of incentives. Basically, there is a kind of a build, push without worrying too much about affordability, which for our area is really not helpful at all in a lot of people's opinion. So for example, and this also shows you, this is using the housing element interactive map. And it shows you that Tatum and San Marcos are now under a builder's remedy. And it also shows you that green are the proposed upzone parcels. So here's the San Marcos block, and here is the South Patterson block. So as the example, the two parcels left in the San Marcos block are the McCloskey Leland, that's the one that's just off of Hollister. And then behind that is a parcel owned by Montessori School. And I'd like to get more information on that, because since we don't know what their plans are, that's an opportunity. We really want to try to find some parcels that don't already have, especially if it's an out-of-town investor and they're coming in and they're just looking at what will be the most profitable. I'm hoping we can find a few of these parcels that we could propose something a little friendlier for the community. But in this example, you could have 15% very low units and 5% low income units. So that qualifies you for the builder's remedy. And you get a 50% bonus of market rate units. So if we do that calculation, then we get a much bigger total number of units. Again, just look at the bottom line. And now our low income percent is 16% and our moderate remains at 1%. So that's why we really need to be paying attention to what is likely, not what people are kind of hoping to see or dreading to see. Okay, so I'm proposing that we take a break for questions. This is basically half of what I'm going to talk about, but the next half is more interesting. What do we want and how do we get it?
So Linda, we need to explain builder's remedy.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing for now and then I'll come back in a few minutes. So, and there are probably people that can explain this better. I know that when I first started looking for that, it was frustrating because there's no number law that you can refer to. It just kept saying there's this old law. But the effect of it is that because of SB 35 and some other amendments over the years, the state is requiring us to upzone, or to fulfill our basic needs for the low, moderate, above moderate new housing units, because for so long nothing was built. So they're really doubling down on the need to get a good housing element that allows for all of that development. And as long as we don't have that, we did miss our deadline for all the jurisdictions, which was in February. So now that we've missed the deadline, any builder, I mean, there are certain things they'd have to do, but you submit your request with a plan for the builder's remedy, and it really does take away a lot of what we should be able to do, or we used to be able to do locally to control that development. Including, I think it makes it harder, for example, to prevent ag land from getting upzoned.
In other words, it short circuits local control in many ways, but the builder has to promise what kind of affordability in order to get that.
20% low income units.
Okay. And what about, and nothing else? And anything else can be above.
Well, there are some, and this is what I don't know a lot about. So I think there are some basic requirements for doing some work with, environmental reviews, and you can't be in fire areas and those kinds of things.
But basically, it's supposed to be an incentive to require low income affordability in these projects, and that. But the incentive is the builder doesn't have to go through all of the challenges that would come from the usual local planning process, and but the number 20% is too low. I'm already concluding you feel this, right? It's too low to meet the needs that we're being told we have to meet. So the state is short-circuiting the local control, but they're not really, the remedy is for builders, but it's not for the community to provide the affordable housing we need. I'll add, it's pretty startling that above, what is it? The below, the moderate level is almost not provided for in any of the existing
Right.
projects that you're talking about.
Right.
All right, so I wonder if there's a question from the floor about that where people want clarification from Linda's presentation. There may be questions that people didn't understand some of what you were talking about. So anybody want to jump in? I'm not sure.
What does upzone mean?
Oh my, okay.
So you're adding more density, especially for ag land. I mean, that's basically no density. And then the state requires that, I think the minimum density would be 20 units per acre, and some of what is being provided for is 30, a minimum of 30 and a maximum of 40 units per acre in that San Marcos area that I'm talking about.
So one of the big consequences of the housing element process, which Linda's reporting on, is that will lead to changes in the upzoning, more dense zoning of a number of plots of land, and she's dealing with South County areas. And of course, this is always a matter of contention for the neighborhoods when they see this kind of upzoning being proposed, right? So what you presented is an interesting combination of potential upzone areas and also overlapping that what the actual owners of that land contemplate for development, which is less dense than what the upzoning might be. Am I fair? Yeah. And so there's certain areas that are not even, there's no specific plan for them, right? Or there's no even hint of a plan. Is that right? What are those properties, Linda?
Well, in the case of the San Marcos area, it's those two parcels, the McCloskey Leland and the Montessori, which are just north of San Marcos Growers, and also a housing development that's there too. So,
and the Glen Annie golf course thing, is that still in the process of being considered as a potential that's the most, as far as I know, controversial area in Goleta area for upzoning, right? People don't
It
want.
has been, yeah, it has been reduced. I think it was 30 units per acre. It's been reduced to 20, a minimum of 20 units per acre on the larger parcel. So they have two parcels. And the second parcel, I think, is now 5 acre minimum instead of 1.5, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's 0.5.
Okay,
Yeah.
so one question I had, where did the number 770 come from with respect to UCSB housing?
So we could look at the details, but it's the 4 projects. It's Devereaux, Ocean Walk, Ocean Meadows, and what's the other one?
Ocean Road.
Ocean Road.
Well, some of them are built already and some are planned.
And I don't have that in front of me.
I don't, the numbers don't quite add up because 540 is what Ocean Road is supposed to be. That project we thought was going forward, but now it's in deep trouble. So we
Yes,
don't.
that is included. So we're assuming that we'll find a developer for that. And that is by far the largest.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's only 200 units above that is what we're looking at right now, I think.
I don't know where that's supposed to be, but.
And I do have the details of it.
Yeah, okay.
We can look at
I was just curious. My impression that UCSB planned housing was previously not applicable to RENA, but now the county is proposing to do that, right? Do you know that about that?
I'm sorry, say that again. I was distracted by it.
I think historically didn't think they could add UCSB housing into the RENA required zoning, but now they are doing that, which I think.
No, they thought they could add anything for staff. It's the dorms that they're not really allowed.
The dorms they can't, right? Okay.
Which actually I wish they could, because that impacted my neighborhood when they didn't have enough dorms.
So any other questions? We want to be able to make sure we get.
Yes, I have questions, Dick. I have my hand up.
Go ahead.
This is Hal Hill, Linda.
Yeah, I see.
And, and as you know, we're working on forming a public bank, and one of our goals is to provide more loan money for affordable housing. And we'd like to partner with any nonprofits in Santa Barbara County that are actually doing loans for low-income housing. Can you tell us what those organizations are?
Hal, I'm going to be a strong chair and rule that this is a great question, but not for today. But we can answer that question. I can answer that question separately with you. But that's a big question that I think with the topic today is simply this land use question. So thanks for that. I'm glad to hear that we'll talk about it. In other words, I'm not shutting you down. It's something we can answer, but not right now. Why don't we go ahead, Linda?
Okay.
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. So I am just getting back to, sometimes my screen splits and I can't find my way back to Zoom, which gets scary. So just give me a minute here. Okay, so there's Zoom. Now can I find, well, let's see what happens when I share my screen. See if it's going to find. I think that's going to work. And by the way, I did put more resources in the chat. So this is for part 2. Okay, so get the bigger screen going.
Let me ask you, Linda, while you're doing this, is this stuff you drew up, or this is all your work, right?
Well, the first half used a lot of data from the county housing element. This second half is just opinions. So it's things I've been working on actually for 4 or 5 years. You'll see at the very end, I have a SWOT analysis that we did for the future housing communities 4 years ago. And it's interesting to kind of look how that's evolved over time. Okay, so what do we want? That's my favorite scenario and the one we need to be focusing on. for me, it's affordability and livability. And of course, those tend to be opposing forces. We have to really work hard to get something which works. Everybody has their own list of what they think livability should look like, and also affordability. And in the middle there, I point out that this is kind of a now or never effort, because we have the deadline coming up this February. And, you know, with Christmas holidays and all the other things that happen, there's just a couple of months left, really, where we could pay attention and give some community input. The next opportunity for the county for public comments will be after the EIR is released. So we can look for that soon. So we know we want a lot of affordability and livability, but we really have to be careful to avoid a lose-lose situation, which I think is what would happen if we did nothing. We definitely don't want to end up with less affordability and a whole bunch of new traffic and loss of open space, etc. So that's another reason why we should be paying attention now. Okay, so upzone considerations. And by the way, this also can help prepare us for how we evaluate the different upzone areas, because they don't have to upzone every single parcel. And one thing that a group of us looked at a few months ago was the ag land issue. I really don't know much about it, and I still don't know a lot, but I think we do want to tackle that, especially when we're thinking of a parcel like San Marcos Growers, which you know, has some assets and some ag land considerations. So, and this is where it starts. When we were looking a couple of months ago, this is what I found, and it came from the SBC Atlas, which I believe comes from an effort that the Land Trust for Santa Barbara put together, and they have an SB County Atlas. I'm not sure what happened to it since about 2016, but this gave you a pretty quick look at all of the pink, which is the urban area. And this type of map did make it distinguished between what they call prime ag land and just other agricultural resources. And I thought, well, you know, that's interesting, because that might be a way to save some ag land at San Marcos, for example, because you have a little square that was the darker green, and that did seem to correspond to the area that they do have vegetables and plants growing in the soil. And the same with this Patterson block. The darker green is mostly Georgie. And I was thinking, well, maybe those could be saved for more ag purposes if we decided we need to save some ag land. You can't tell on this map, but Glen Annie wasn't really in that area. It was kind of across the street from this creek bed here. Okay, so that's where I was, where my head was a few months ago. Then this is what I got from Jesse Steele at the county, who's in charge of the housing element. This is what they are using. It's their prime soils map, and you can find this on that interactive map. I put a link in the resources. And first of all, this is the same we were looking at before. You got your pending projects that are purple, upzone, which are this kind of light bright green. And then all of this other green are what they're calling prime soils. So that kind of muddied the water, because you've got these fingers of green basically going through all of the upzone sites and everywhere else. So it's hard to know to what extent that is something that you should definitely protect above other areas. And to muddy it further, on the same interactive map site, you can choose important farmland, and that does get you back to something that's more like that first set of maps, where it does say you've got prime farmland in that block of San Marcos and also the top of Georgie. So I don't know what we do with all that. I think we need to have more meetings where we have experts come and really talk to us about what's important. How should we look at this from just an agricultural asset point of view? Let me just make sure. Okay. So looking at specifically San Marcos, and what are the opportunities? So you got possibly new models for family-friendly and affordable neighborhoods. Because so far, everything looks just alike. We have developers who are proposing 20% affordable or even less for some of the pending projects. They're not really geared to any particular family type. If we're looking regionally, I'm concerned about where families are going to go, because I used to think that La Cumbre would be the perfect center for families. And then it looks like that's going a direction with not a whole lot of affordability and smaller units. So we would like to see some 3-bedroom units, and we would like to see some models that promote a sense of community and more affordability, and a chance to get more equity, a chance to keep our younger families in town, to get more younger workers, essential workers housed, and so on. And what is interesting about this particular location, you're within 1 block of 2 elementary schools that are in the Goleta district and San Marcos High School. And you're next to Turnpike Shopping Center. You're close to county offices and the campus. So you could have a county first responders, workforce housing. There are quite a few opportunities for that kind of a tie-in where you've got the housing close to jobs. And just a kind of I put a link in for the main Begg farmhouse. That's right on the corner of San Marcos Road and Hollister. And it's a new historic building. And they are there they're kind of tied into the Stowe House people and a lot of Goleta history buffs. They want to support the whole idea or importance of agriculture, and they're going to be a community center. So it's a chance to build on all of that. Okay, and then here's the final. This is a SWOT analysis. It's funny because we used to have meetings where people were in person, and I loved using giant Post-its. So this was one of our giant Post-its that we had for one of the meetings where we were forming the nonprofit. And looking at this over the years, it hasn't changed a whole lot, but we've been adding to it. Sadly, well, just going through it. So, we still have a small enough community, so there is a chance to get people's attention and to have the leaders listening to you. The only negative is UCSB. It used to be a strength. We had it under the potential partner list, and now it goes somewhere between weaknesses and threats, I guess. So that's been disappointing. And then my favorite part of this that I still believe in is that Santa Barbara can be a national leader and develop models and proof of concept for thriving, affordable, livable communities. And so this is our one big opportunity, but time is of the essence. We only have really a couple of months before some of these parcels just disappear from contention. And then I'm adding for new threats, the out-of-town investors with no ties to the community. They're interested in how they can sell this to other companies that come in and are only interested in profit, plus the state laws, which I think may work in some parts of the state, but really are not helpful for our area that has 0 vacancy and very expensive land. So I think we're getting
That's
close.
very, so you want to run through this?
Well, this is my last page. I thought it was that.
Okay.
This is just, so what I'm continuing to work on are similar charts, but for the other 3 areas of Glen Annie, South Patterson, Carpinteria. And I think we do need to think about a list of factors that we can all use to evaluate these upzones, because that's going to be very contentious. So the more of us that can kind of get on the same page and look at that ahead of time, it will be helpful. And how do we get compromises? We're going to consult with people. And as I said, there's a 45-day public comment period after the EIR is released. And the other thing I'll throw out is that this was all about the county, but now we have the information that the city of Santa Barbara Housing Element hopes to go to City Council on December 12th. And that's after they've been to Planning Commission. And they really need to get that adopted by the end of the year, because if they don't do that soon, then we can't get this new local housing trust fund set up, and it will be a whole 18 months later that they would have money available for that. So that's really important too. Okay, so that's it.
All right, so what I think is a little it's unclear to me anyway, that some of the important points here, how do we translate what you just said about all these things that we need to look at to actual action? In other words, how do we take what because you didn't even fully develop the points in all your presentation. Is everything you just presented available in print form, or can people get hold of it?
I don't have the script of what I said,
No,
but if
the
people
chart.
would like the slides, as I've said in the chat, I've got my email address. So if they would just send me a note saying that they would like slides, I mean, I can send it to people like you that I know would like it. And then if there are other people, they could just send me a note. Because I might find that there was a mistake somewhere. So maybe I'll use a few days to just make sure there's nothing to update before I send that out too.
I guess what I'm asking is there really time to take the major pieces of land that you would like to analyze, have you do that kind of analysis that you just did for the San Marcos, for all of them, and get it into people's hands so they can use it if they want to testify at the housing element hearings and stuff like that?
Yeah, that'll go pretty quickly, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and one other thing to say, just while I'm thinking about it, what I've concluded from going through this is that somehow we need to have flexibility. We need to have some parcels where we could try some new things, or somebody pops up in 2 or 3 years with this great idea. We want to have some land left. So how can we get a certifiable housing element and still have that flexibility is a question.
all right, so that's really my question too, in a different way. So the housing element process we're doing or into is about zoning, not about building itself. But then what you're making clear is there are actual development plans for some of these plots of land, that those plans are by private developers who are not particularly, they're going to minimize the affordability, they're going to standardize the planning models that they use, when in fact what you rather interestingly said is what we need to be able to do down the line is a whole series of housing alternatives, ranging, use terms like co-housing, co-op housing, different ways of creating affordable housing opportunities for different kinds of people in the workforce, and whether families and so on and so forth. And the builder's remedy kind of state policy, I'm just trying to get at the nub of what you're saying. The builder's remedy gives everything to the developer to do what they want, provided they say they're going to be some percentage of affordability greater than what they might otherwise have. But that 20% isn't really greater than what the community is already requiring as for affordability. So this is the bind. I wonder whether you or anyone else sitting here right now has any way of breaking through this. Can we, because what's happening on the good side, the strength side, is that like the city is creating a housing fund for affordable housing. The state may be creating funding for affordable housing. There's going to be more resources available for affordability, but that's out of phase with maybe some of these developments. Am I giving the right kind of question?
Yeah,
So-
and, I think I just realized, I think it completely skipped an important slide. I don't think I showed one that has the three different, the lower income, and then a column for the moderate, the low to moderate workforce and funding. That's really important. Let me see if I can show that
Well,
quickly.
while you're doing that, Shane, you seem very restless, so maybe you have something to say.
Always.
And you're muted. That may be the problem. Shane, you're muted. You're muted, Shane. Hey,
Up to.
okay.
Am I not muted?
Now you're good.
Okay, I like two quick points. One is legislatively, the folks that favor flexibility and creative solutions to these housing dilemmas are swimming up the stream. The YIMBYs have the whip hand in the legislature, and they're just stalking it to us. So I mean, you have to. It's got a long, hard, difficult fight. The one thing I would like to say is the North County people up here. I see Ken and Jeannie and Sarah McDonald. Keep your eye on Santa Maria. My understanding is that what Santa Maria wants to do is to solve their housing problems in one fell swoop by annexing, here's a technical term coming up, a shitload of farmland to the east of the city, and that's how they're going to solve their problems. And not to put too fine a point on it, but the place in which you have to temper that sort of thing is at the city level. You can't really wait until it gets further up the thing. So the North County folks need to be on their toes, I think.
We have been addressing this, and so far the city has made recommendations that are counter to what we recommend. So, but well, it's the planning commission that's made those recommendations. It's going to the city next, and we are trying to persuade them not to annex all that land or to try to annex it. But we're going to depend on you, Shane, to not let that happen.
Well, yeah, here's the thing. The reason you might want to depend on me is because I'm on LAFCO and I have one vote at the point. But the problem with LAFCO is you have to rely on the lead agency, which is the city, to do the environmental review and the spade work. And if they do a lousy job, you either got to bounce it back or you're stuck with it. So it's very important for people to be active at the municipal level in trying to get something that is more palatable to the community.
Yeah, and we have been, and we've been working with CEC too to try to do that, and some other of our partners.
Yeah,
So
that's fine. The one thing that really you need to remember above everything else when you're dealing with ag land, you do not want to pave over your food supply. Somebody's got to actually produce the stuff that people eat. And there has to be a really concentrated effort to save that, because if you give up your really productive agricultural land, we're going to be in a real pickle.
Yeah, even Growers Shipper Vegetable Association has spoken out against that. So they're
absolutely. They know it more better than anybody else.
Yeah.
Okay,
second rule of ag land is you don't make decisions about ag without talking to people that actually grow the stuff, but that's a different matter.
So Shane, what we learned just now, is that SBCAN up north is working on these things. Maybe they can consult with you repeatedly because your passion and knowledge is going to be useful if you're available.
Well, I'm not that available. I take a pretty hands-off position as far as LAFCO. I'm happy to talk to the North County folks anytime they want about anything.
Very good offer. All right, Linda, give us this.
So this is super important in 30 seconds. We've heard a lot about increasing rental housing. And we do want to worry about funding for subsidized housing. But we don't really give enough attention to that. It is a missing middle issue. I think we need to divide the lower income into two groups. You have employed people, and then you have people that need supportive services. And it's perhaps a different funding solution. So that's why another thing we need to be thinking about for the future. And how we can get maybe lease to own or situations where the future residents can be participants in funding and finding resources.
All right, well, it looks to me like what you've done here is create, well, Merrill's saying the county planning should be conducting workshops all along, and there's been minimal opportunities for that. Merrill, you want to say any more on that? Is there any way to remedy that right now?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, CPA, we've been on this now for more than a year and a half. Linda, your work today and the work that you've been doing for months prior to this, I personally feel this is what the county should have been doing. We have not had the opportunities to look at maps. Now we're supposed to have another opportunity, at some time soon. But from what I've heard, there's going to be one hearing in the north and there's going to be one hearing in the south. Now look at what the city of Goleta has done. I mean, they had 3 hearings. They continued it for hours and hours and hours. So the city stakeholders had an opportunity to look at these maps. I mean, we just had something up in Vandenberg Village, and it really came back to the builder's remedy. We had 130 very angry people. I did not go to it. I knew what it was going to be like. And we have our county people. It was our supervisor and, somebody, and the developer that was there. They're doing this under the developer, the builder's remedy. And everyone, it's like it's a foregone conclusion. They have the right to do this. The builder's remedy is going to get all this built, and community, you have no resources. So I don't know how we can get the county at this very late date to do something, to have more discussions like we're having today.
I think, so we're coming to the end of our allotted time. And I want to make one point that maybe is very, very clear behind this whole discussion, which is that supply and demand in the housing market is not a solution to affordability. And yet that the builder's remedy, with the useful fact that the builder's remedy provides is some requirement for affordability. But the premise, and that's what I think Shane meant when he referred to the YIMBY influence, is just build more housing and that will take care of affordability. And I think this has got to be challenged. Most of us realize this is not going to be the solution. And what Linda's talking about is a much more sophisticated and variegated set of strategies for housing down the line. And the question is, how are we going to have the space and time and resources to do that? That's what we're about. The one thing that, since we're talking about the state policies, we don't talk to Monique Limon and Greg Hart enough about all of this. And maybe that's the next step, is to say, look, the state legislature's pushing all these remedies, in quotes, that are not tied to the actual creativity and needs of the communities. Let me put it that way. Is that a fair way of summarizing, Linda, at this point? And I don't know whether, Mike, you want to SBCAG answer or respond in any way to what we've been talking about before we sign off.
I just say that I'm also in charge of RENA, so I'm happy, like, if you want to invite me back sometime, I'm happy to answer questions. I think I was trying to hold myself back earlier to answering some of the questions that were coming up, but feel free to invite me in the future. And if you ever want to talk RENA, like RENA's 3 phases where SBCAG and the state work on the region number. SBCAG works with the local governments on splitting that number up, and then the local governments do the housing elements, which is what's going on now. But I have a wealth of knowledge on the topic, so if you want to invite me back, I'm happy to come.
Well, maybe should we, so the immediate point, Linda, is let's get your slides. And maybe this is also, you need to send it to Ken. That might be the simplest way to do it. And if people want, they can send to the SBCAN email address a request to get the slides. If you put yourself up on chat, maybe we can preserve that. Make sure we save the chat, Ken. And both of these slideshows are invaluable. This is stuff we all need to know, and it shouldn't be that hard to get it into everybody's inboxes who wants it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'd rather not share it with people that didn't hear the commentary. So
Yeah, of course, yeah. But you, yeah, all right. So thank you, folks. We always commit ourselves to a 1:30 closing, and it's really amazing to me that all of you sat through a very complicated, information-packed stuff. Makes me feel like a professor teaching a class, which I can't feel. Thanks a lot, and carry on, folks. Best as we
Happy equinox.
Kudos to you, Linda, for a great presentation.
Yeah.
thanks. Scott.
Thank you both. Lots of things to think about.
at least think.